The ESS Iron Horizon was drifting through the cold silence beyond Neptune when the light came. It started as a flicker on Ensign Park Soy's communication screen. She thought it was a glitch at first. The ship was old and far from home, running a patrol route so boring that most of the crew spent their shifts counting the minutes until they could sleep. But the flicker grew brighter, and then it was not a flicker at all. It was a signal, massive, structured, and it was not coming from Earth. Soy's fingers froze above her console. She had trained for this. Every officer in the Terran fleet had trained for this. First contact protocols, alien signal analysis, emergency response chains. She knew the steps. But knowing the steps and actually doing them when a wall of blue light erupted from the center of the bridge were two very different things. The hologram filled the room from floor to ceiling. It showed a figure that was not human. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, with a body like a stretched insect wrapped in robes made of shifting light. Its face, if it could be called a face, had too many eyes and not enough expression. Behind it, hundreds of other shapes moved in a vast chamber that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of crystal. Captain Han Jisoo was sitting in her command chair when the hologram appeared. She did not stand. She did not flinch. She simply looked up from the tactical report she had been reading and studied the alien figure the way a person might study a strange bird that had landed on their windowsill. The alien spoke. Its voice came through the ship's translation system in flat, precise words. I am High Arbiter Voleth of the Galactic Accord. I address the commanding authority of the species designated as human. Your expansion beyond your birth system has been noted. You have established unauthorized settlements in 3 stellar regions without registration, review, or submission to the governance framework of the Accord. This is a violation of Statute 7 Omega. Voleth paused. Its many eyes blinked in sequence, like lights going off one by one in a building at night. You are hereby summoned to comply with the following terms. First, you will withdraw all populations from your colony worlds immediately. Second, you will surrender all ships capable of faster-than-light travel for inspection and cataloging. Third, you will send a delegation to the Accord capital to formally register your species and accept the legal authority of the Galactic Accord over all matters beyond your home system. The bridge was silent. Lieutenant Yoon Tae-ho stood near the weapons console, his arms crossed, his jaw tight. Bae Nari had come up from the science lab the moment the signal hit, and was standing near the rear of the bridge, recording everything. Sergeant Kwon Do-hyun was leaning against the wall by the door, his hand resting casually near his sidearm, watching the hologram with narrowed eyes. Voleth continued. Its tone was not angry, it was not even stern. It was the tone of someone explaining something very simple to someone very slow. This is not a negotiation. The Accord has maintained order in this region of the galaxy for 9,000 years. Every species that has reached beyond its home star has submitted to our framework. This is how civilization is preserved. This is how peace is kept. You are young. You do not yet understand the systems that govern this space. But you will learn, as all others have learned. Voleth tilted its head slightly. Compliance is in your best interest. The Accord does not make this offer twice. The hologram held for a moment, then flickered and faded. The blue light drained from the bridge, and the normal hum of the ship's systems returned. The stars outside the viewports looked exactly the same as they had 5 minutes ago. But everything had changed. Nobody spoke. They all looked at Jisoo. She was still sitting in her chair. Her face showed nothing. She could have been thinking about the fate of humanity, or thinking about what to have for dinner. With Jisoo, it was impossible to tell. That was one of the reasons the fleet had given her command of their best ship. She did not panic. She did not rush. She processed. 10 seconds passed. 20. Taeho shifted his weight slightly. Soyi's hands were shaking above her console. Then Jisoo leaned back in her chair, crossed one leg over the other, and spoke in a voice so calm it almost sounded bored. "That's adorable." Dohan let out a short breath that might have been a laugh. Nari raised an eyebrow. Jisoo looked at Soi. "Ensign, open a reply channel. Same frequency, same range. I want every ship and station that heard their message to hear ours." Soi swallowed hard and nodded. Her hands moved across the console. "Channel open, Captain." Jisoo did not stand. She did not raise her voice. She spoke as if she were leaving a note on someone's door. "This is Captain Han Jisoo of the Earth stellar ship Iron Horizon, responding on behalf of the United Terran Council. We received your summons. We appreciate your interest in our activities. However, we must respectfully inform the Galactic Accord that Earth operates under its own legal framework, established through centuries of development, conflict, and reform. We do not recognize the authority of the Accord over human space, human ships, or human people. Our laws are our own. You are welcome to read them, if you can get close enough." She made a small cutting gesture with her hand. Soi closed the channel. The bridge was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Before, it had been the silence of shock. Now, it was the silence of people realizing that the ground beneath them had just shifted. Nari was the first to speak. She stepped forward, her datapad already glowing with files she had been studying for years. "Captain, I need to tell you something. I have been analyzing the Accord's legal archives since we first intercepted fragments of their communications 3 years ago. Their legal code is enormous. Thousands of statutes covering everything from trade to territorial expansion." Jisoo looked at her, and in 9,000 years of recorded history, no species has ever refused a summons. Not one. Every species that was contacted either submitted willingly or was forced to submit. There is no record of anyone saying no. Jisoo was quiet for a moment. Then a small smile appeared on her face. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been dealt a very interesting hand in a very dangerous game. "Good," she said. "Then they won't know what to do." She stood and straightened her uniform. "Taeho, set a course for Earth. Best speed. Nari, I want a full analysis of their legal system on my desk before we arrive. Every weakness, every gap, every assumption they have made about how the universe is supposed to work." She looked at the view screen, at the endless dark, and the tiny points of light scattered across it. Somewhere out there, an empire that had ruled for 9,000 years had just told humanity to kneel. Jisoo had no intention of kneeling. She never had. "We have work to do," she said quietly. The news hit Earth like a hammer. Within 6 hours of the Iron Horizon's transmission, every government on the planet had seen it. Within 12 hours, every person with a screen had seen it. The alien hologram of Voleth played on loop across every network, every feed, every public display in every city on every continent. And right after it, they heard their own captain's reply. Opinions split fast and split hard. Some people cheered. They shared clips of Jisoo's words and called her a hero. They said this was what humanity was built for. They said no alien empire had the right to tell Earth what to do, and they were proud that someone had finally said it out loud. Others were terrified. The Accord had 9,000 years of history. They had hundreds of species under their control. Intelligence reports suggested they commanded over 40,000 warships. Earth's entire fleet numbered less than 200, and most of those were patrol ships and cargo escorts. Going to war with the Accord was not brave, it was suicide. Captain Han Jisoo arrived on Earth 4 days later. The Iron Horizon docked at the Seoul Megaplex Orbital Station, and Jisoo was escorted directly to the chambers of the United Terran Council. The council was made up of representatives from every nation and territory on Earth and its colonies. They sat in a massive curved hall, lined with screens showing data feeds from across human space. The air was thick with tension. Jisoo stood at the center of the floor. She wore her standard uniform. No medals, no ceremony. She looked like she had come to give a weather report. The council chairman, a tired-looking man named Cho Min-soo, spoke first. Captain Han, your response to the Accord summons has created a diplomatic crisis of a scale we have never faced. Some members of this council believe you acted without authority. Others believe you spoke for all of us. Before we decide what to do next, we want to hear from you directly. Why did you refuse? Jisoo did not hesitate. Because submission is permanent. Once we hand over our ships and accept their laws, we do not get them back. There is no recorded case of any species regaining sovereignty after joining the Accord. It is a one-way door. I was not willing to walk through it on behalf of 8 billion people without their permission. A council member from the European delegation leaned forward. But you did act without permission, Captain. You spoke for Earth without consulting anyone. I responded to a direct military summons aimed at my ship, Jisoo said evenly. I did not declare war. I did not fire a weapon. I told them we have our own laws. That is a fact, not a provocation. The room buzzed with murmured arguments. Jisoo waited. She had expected this. She knew that fear would do most of the talking in this room, and she also knew that fear eventually gets tired. When the noise settled, she continued. The Accord has never fought a species that refused them. Their military is built for policing, not warfare. They show up with big ships and big numbers, and every species they have ever contacted took one look and surrendered. That is their entire strategy. Intimidation. They do not know what happens when someone pushes back, because no one ever has. She paused and looked around the room. Humanity has spent its entire history fighting itself. We have fought wars over land, over food, over ideas, over words written on paper. We wrote our laws in blood. We burned our cities down and rebuilt them. We broke ourselves apart and put ourselves back together so many times that survival is not something we hope for. It is something we do. The Accord has never met anything like us. And I believe that is our advantage. The chamber was silent. Chairman Cho looked at her for a long moment, then turned to Dr. Bae Nari, who had been standing quietly to the side, with a datapad full of files. Dr. Bae, you have been studying the Accord's legal system. Do we have any option other than refusal or submission? Nari stepped forward. She was smaller than Jisoo, quieter, and she wore glasses that she did not need because her vision had been corrected years ago. She kept them because they made her feel like herself. Yes, she said, there is a third option. Buried in the Accord's legal code, in a section that has not been referenced in over 2,000 years, there is a clause called Article 44 Rho. It states that any species may challenge the Accord's jurisdiction over them if they can demonstrate a pre-existing legal framework of equivalent complexity, depth, and ethical foundation. She let that sink in for a moment. In simple terms, if we can prove that our laws are as developed and as serious as theirs, they cannot force us to submit. We have the legal right to stand as equals. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted questions over each other. Cho raised his hand for silence. Can we prove it? He asked. Nari almost smiled. Chairman, humanity's legal history stretches back over 4,000 years. From the earliest written codes, to the Geneva Conventions, to the Terran Charter of 2031. We have laws governing war, peace, trade, human rights, environmental protection, artificial intelligence, genetic modification, and space colonization. Our legal system has been tested by every kind of failure imaginable. It has been broken and repaired more times than I can count. That is exactly what makes it strong. She turned to face the full council. The Accord's legal code has not been amended in 4,000 years. It is static. It does not grow. It does not adapt. It does not learn from its mistakes because it does not admit it makes mistakes. Our system does. That is not a weakness. That is proof that our laws are alive. The vote happened that evening. It was not unanimous. 143 representatives voted to invoke Article 44 Rho and refuse submission. 61 voted to negotiate. 12 abstained. It was enough. The decision was made. Earth would not kneel. Meanwhile, far from Earth, on a gleaming diplomatic station called Lethera, the Accord was making its own decisions. High Arbiter Voleth stood in his private chamber, reading the transcript of Jisu's reply for the fourth time. His many eyes moved across the words slowly, as if he were trying to find a hidden meaning that was not there. Ambassador Rini stood nearby. She was shorter than most Accord officials, with smooth amphibian skin that shifted color with her mood. Right now, it was a pale, worried blue. "Arbiter," she said carefully, "this species is unusual. Their refusal does not follow any pattern we have seen. I recommend we study them further before taking action." Voleth did not look up. "There is nothing to study. They are young and foolish. They will comply, or they will be made to comply. That is how order is maintained. With respect, they are not behaving like a young species. They are behaving like a species that has been through something we do not understand." Voleth closed the transcript. "I have already ordered Commander Dreth to assemble a compliance fleet. He will proceed to their system and remind them of the scale they are dealing with." Rini's skin turned a darker shade of blue. She wanted to argue, but she had served the Accord long enough to know when an argument was already lost. She left Voleth's chamber and returned to her own quarters. She sat in silence for a while, thinking. Then she opened her personal terminal and began searching through the data the humans had broadcast. Their history, their wars, their laws. She read for hours. And the more she read, the more her skin changed color. Not to blue, not to the calm green of understanding. It shifted to something she had not felt in a very long time. It turned white, the color of fear. Back on Earth, Captain Jisu stood in the docking bay of the Iron Horizon, watching her crew prepare the ship for departure. Tejo approached her, with a datapad showing their fleet assignment. 12 ships. That was all the Council had authorized for the initial response. 12 ships against whatever they bring, Tejo said. His voice was flat, but his eyes asked the question he was too disciplined to say out loud. Jisu took the datapad and looked it over. "It's 11 more than I need," she said. Tejo stared at her for a moment. Then he nodded once, turned, and went back to his duties. He had served under Jisu for 7 years. He had learned that when she said something that sounded impossible, she usually meant it. The Iron Horizon launched at dawn. Behind it, Earth turned slowly in the sunlight, blue and white and stubbornly alive. Ahead of it, the dark was waiting. And somewhere in that dark, 40 warships were already moving. They came out of faster-than-light travel, like a wall of steel and light. 40 warships of the Galactic Accord dropped into normal space at the edge of what Earth called the Soul Exclusion Zone, the invisible line that marked the boundary of human-claimed territory. Each ship was enormous, at least 3 times the size of the largest human vessel, built from alloys that shimmered like oil on water. They moved in perfect formation, a grid so precise it looked like it had been designed by a machine. It probably had been. Commander Dreth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Blade of Order. He was tall even by Accord standards, with armored skin the color of dark stone, and 4 arms that he kept folded behind his back in the military posture of his species. He had commanded the compliance fleet for over 100 years. He had brought 37 species into the Accord. Not one of them had required him to fire a single weapon. He did not expect today to be any different. His sensor officer reported the human fleet's position. 12 ships, arranged in a tight formation directly ahead, holding still. Their weapons were powered down, their shields were up. Dreth studied the display for a moment. 12 ships. He almost felt embarrassed for them. It was like watching a small animal stand in the path of a river and refuse to move. Brave, perhaps, but ultimately meaningless. He opened a broadcast channel. "This is Commander Dreth of the Galactic Accord Compliance Fleet. You are in violation of Accord Statute 7 Omega. You have been summoned to comply. This is your final opportunity. Power down your shields, transmit your surrender codes, and prepare to be escorted to the Accord capital. If you do not comply within 1 standard hour, you will be classified as a rogue species and subjected to forced integration. There will be no further warnings." He closed the channel and waited. On the bridge of the Iron Horizon, Captain Han Jisoo listened to Dreth's words without any change in her expression. Around her, the crew was tense but controlled. Teho stood at the tactical station, his hands resting lightly on the console. Nari was at the science station, monitoring the communication frequencies. Soi was at her post, her face pale but her hands steady. Do-hyun was standing by the door with his marine squad on standby, 1 deck below, ready to move at a word. Jisoo looked at the view screen. 40 ships. She had known they would bring a lot, but seeing them was different from knowing about them. They filled the screen from edge to edge, a fleet so large it blocked out the stars behind it. She took a slow breath, then she turned to Soi. "Open a channel. All frequencies, every band. I want every ship in this system, and every relay station within 50 light-years to hear what I am about to say." Soi's hands moved. "All frequencies open, Captain. You are broadcasting live across the entire Accord communication network." Jisoo stood. She straightened her jacket. She did not look at her crew. She looked directly at the view screen, at the wall of alien warships, and she spoke. "This is Captain Han Jisoo of the Earth stellar ship Iron Horizon. I am addressing Commander Dreth, the Galactic Accord, and every species listening on this channel." Her voice was calm, not loud, not angry. It carried the weight of someone who had thought about every word and chosen each one carefully. "You have told us to obey. You have told us that your laws are the only laws that matter in this galaxy. You have told us that every species before us has submitted, and that we should do the same. You say this as if it is wisdom. I say it is a confession, because what you are really telling us is that in 9,000 years, no one has ever stood in front of you and said no. And you think that means you are right. It does not. It means you have never been tested." She paused. The silence on the channel was absolute. Across the galaxy, on ships and stations and worlds, thousands of beings were listening. "Let me tell you about Earth. Let me tell you about what it costs to build a law that means something. On our world, we did not receive our rights from a council of elders. We were not given a code by a higher power. We built our laws from the ground up, and the ground was soaked in blood." She took a step closer to the view screen. "We fought wars that killed millions. We built weapons that could destroy our entire planet, and then we sat across tables from each other and agreed not to use them. We wrote laws that said every person has the right to a fair trial, and we wrote those laws because for centuries we tortured confessions out of innocent people. We created protections for civilians in war because we had spent generations killing them without a thought. Every law we have exists because we failed first. Every right we hold was paid for with suffering." Her voice did not waver. It did not rise. It stayed level and steady, like a blade being drawn slowly from a sheath. "Your accord has maintained order for 9,000 years. That is impressive. But your laws have not changed in 4,000 of those years. You do not grow. You do not adapt. You do not learn. You simply enforce. And when a species comes along that does not fit your framework, you do not ask why. You do not wonder if maybe your framework is incomplete. You send warships. 40 ships, shimmering, and vast, and terrible. We are not afraid of your ships, Commander Dreth. We have faced worse. We have faced ourselves. And we are still here. She straightened. On behalf of the United Terran Council, and under the authority of Earth's sovereign legal framework, I formally invoke Article 44 Rho of the Galactic Accord's own legal code. Earth claims the right of equivalent jurisdiction. We demand a formal hearing. And until that hearing is concluded, any act of aggression against human space will be a violation of your own laws. She let the words hang in the silence for a moment. Then she sat back down in her chair and made a small gesture to Soyi. The channel remained open. On the Blade of Order, Commander Dreth stared at his display. He had expected defiance. He had not expected this. The human had not threatened him. She had spoken to the entire galaxy as if she were a teacher and they were all her students. And she had invoked Article 44 Rho. He had to look it up. He had never heard of it. When his legal officer explained what it was, his 4 hands tightened into fists. He could not fire. Not now. Not with the entire Accord communication network broadcasting every word. If he attacked a species that had just invoked a legal challenge, he would be the one breaking the law. Volith would have his command. Other species would question the Accord's integrity. It would be a disaster. But he could test them. He could see if their courage was real, or if it was just words. He gave an order. A single scout ship detached from his fleet, and moved forward, crossing the invisible boundary of human space. It was small, fast, and unarmed. A probe. A dare. On the iron horizon, Tejo spotted it immediately. 1 ship crossing the line, Captain. Scout class. No weapons detected. Jisoo looked at Do-Yun. Sergeant, board that ship. No casualties. Bring the crew back to Commander Dreth with my compliments. Do-Yun grinned. It was not a friendly grin. Yes, Captain. 4 minutes later, Do-Yun's marine team had breached the scout ship, subdued its crew of 3 without firing a shot, and escorted them back to the Accord fleet in a human shuttle. Attached to the shuttle's hull was a sealed envelope containing a handwritten note from Jisoo. It read, "Next time, knock." Dreth read the note in silence. Then he ordered his fleet to withdraw to a holding position outside the exclusion zone. He sent a message to High Arbiter Volith that contained only 2 words. They're unreasonable. On Station Lythra, Volith received the message and stood very still for a very long time. For the first time in his long career, he did not know what to do next. Ambassador Rini, watching from her quarters, said nothing. But that night, she began quietly transmitting copies of Earth's legal history and Jisoo's broadcast to 16 other species across the Accord. She did not ask permission. She did not explain why. She simply pressed send and waited to see what would grow. The Accord capital was a world that had been built, not born. It hung in the center of a trinary star system, a sphere of crystal and metal so large it had its own gravity, its own weather, its own oceans. Billions of beings from hundreds of species lived on it, worked on it, and governed from it. At its heart was the Grand Chamber of Arbitration, a room so vast that clouds sometimes formed near its ceiling. The walls were lined with the recorded laws of every species the Accord had ever absorbed. 9,000 years of obedience, carved in light. The ESS Iron Horizon arrived in orbit above the capital, flanked by 2 escort cruisers. It looked absurdly small against the backdrop of the artificial world below. That was exactly why Captain Han Jisoo had brought it. She wanted the Accord to see a small ship and underestimate everything inside it. The human delegation took a shuttle to the surface. Dr. Baynari led the legal team. She carried 3 datapads, each loaded with thousands of files. Behind her walked Jisoo, Tejo, and Soyi. Do-Yun stayed on the ship with his marines, on alert, watching the dozens of Accord military vessels that circled the capital like patient sharks. The Grand Chamber was already full when they arrived. Representatives from over 200 species filled the curved rows of seats that rose from the chamber floor to the distant ceiling. Some were tall and thin, others were short and wide, others floated in gravity bubbles or breathed through masks connected to tanks of alien air. The noise of hundreds of different languages being translated simultaneously created a constant low hum, like standing inside a machine. At the center of the floor was a raised platform where the challenge would take place. On one side sat the Accord's legal representatives, a team of 12 scholars chosen by Volith. On the other side, there was a single chair. She adjusted her glasses, set her datapads on the small table in front of her, and looked up at the chamber as if she did this every Tuesday. High Arbiter Volith presided from a raised seat above the floor. He looked down at Nari with his many eyes and spoke in a voice that echoed through the chamber. The species designated as human has invoked Article 44 Rho, claiming equivalent jurisdiction under a pre-existing legal framework. This claim will now be tested. The humans must demonstrate that their legal system possesses equivalent complexity, scope, and ethical foundation to the Accord's governance code. If they succeed, they will be recognized as a sovereign entity outside Accord jurisdiction. If they fail, they will submit immediately and without condition. He paused. You may begin. Nari stood. She did not rush. She looked around the chamber slowly, taking in the hundreds of alien faces watching her. Then she began to speak. Thank you, High Arbiter. I will begin with a simple statement. Earth's legal system is not perfect. It has never been perfect. That is the first thing I want this chamber to understand, because it is the most important thing about it. She tapped her datapad, and a holographic display appeared above the platform, visible to the entire chamber. It showed a timeline, a very long timeline. 4,000 years ago, humans carved their first known legal code into a stone pillar. It was called the Code of Hammurabi. It was crude. It was harsh. Many of its punishments were brutal by any standard. But it established a principle that still stands at the foundation of human law today. The principle that rules must be written down, that they must be known, that no one can be punished by a law they could not have known existed. She moved along the timeline. Over the next 4,000 years, we broke this principle and rebuilt it more times than I can count. We created legal systems that protected the powerful and crushed the weak. Then we tore those systems down and built new ones. We wrote constitutions that declared all people equal, and then we spent centuries fighting to make those words actually mean something. She looked up at Volith. Your Accord's legal code contains over 90,000 statutes. That is impressive. But I have a question for this chamber. When was the last time any of those statutes were changed? Silence. The Accord's legal scholars shifted uncomfortably. Volith said nothing. Nari continued, I will answer for you. The last amendment to the Accord's legal code was made 4,012 years ago. Since then, not a single word has been added, removed, or revised. In 4,000 years, you have not changed one law. Not one. She let that sink in. On Earth, we change our laws constantly. We argue about them. We protest them. We challenge them in courts, in the streets, in our homes. We do this because we learned something that the Accord appears to have forgotten. A law that cannot be questioned is not a law. It is a cage. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the constant hum of translation had faded, as if every being in the room was holding its breath. Nari brought up a new display. Let me show you what our laws cost us. This is a list of conflicts in human history. Not all of them. That would take days. Just the ones that directly resulted in new legal protections. The display filled with entries. Wars, revolutions, disasters, atrocities. Next to each one, a law that was born from it. The right to a fair trial. born from centuries of torture and false confession. The protection of civilians in war, born from the bombing of cities. Environmental protection laws, born from the poisoning of rivers and the death of forests. Rights for artificial intelligence, born from the sentience debates of 2029-88, when humanity had to decide whether the minds it had created deserved the same protections as the minds that created them. The list went on and on. It was long and it was ugly and it was honest. Nari turned back to the chamber. Every law on this list was written because we failed, because we did something terrible, and then we looked at what we had done, and we said, never again. And then sometimes we did it again, and we wrote another law. That is what a living legal system looks like. It is not clean, it is not elegant, but it is real. It breathes, it grows, it corrects itself. She paused and looked directly at the Accord's legal scholars. Now I will ask you something else. Your code has 90,000 statutes. How many times do you think we will let failure guide us before we decide we have failed enough? How many of them were written in response to a failure of the Accord itself? None of the scholars answered. They did not need to. The answer was 0. The Accord did not admit failure. It did not have mechanisms for self-correction. Its code was written as if it had been perfect from the beginning, and would be perfect forever. Nari adjusted her glasses. The Accord's legal framework is not a legal system. It is a control system. It tells species what they cannot do. It does not ask what they should do. It does not grow because it does not listen. It does not change because it does not believe it can be wrong. It is 9,000 years old, and it has the maturity of a child who has never been told no. The chamber erupted. Dozens of species began talking at once. Some were angry. Voleth struck a resonance chime that sent a deep vibration through the room, demanding silence. The arbitration panel, a group of 7 neutral species chosen to judge the challenge, withdrew to deliberate. They were gone for 3 hours. During that time, Jisoo sat beside Nari on the chamber floor, drinking water from a metal canteen she had brought from the ship. Taeho stood behind them like a statue. Soi sat quietly, watching the alien delegates in the rows above, reading their body language, making notes. When the panel returned, the lead arbiter, a being that looked like a tree made of coral, delivered the ruling. Earth's legal framework was recognized as a sovereign equivalent under Article 44 Rho. Humanity could not be compelled to submit to Accord governance. For one moment, the chamber was perfectly still. Then it was not. Nari closed her eyes and exhaled. Jisoo put a hand on her shoulder, just for a second. High Arbiter Voleth rose from his seat and spoke over the noise of the chamber. This ruling is advisory. It is not binding. The security of the Accord and the stability of galactic order cannot be determined by a single hearing. I am ordering Commander Dreth to resume operations in the Sol system. The chamber went cold. Ambassador Rini, who had been watching from the gallery, stood up. Her skin was a deep, burning red, the color of open anger. Arbiter Voleth, you are overruling the arbitration panel. That has not been done in 6,000 years. It has not been necessary in 6,000 years, Voleth replied. Jisoo watched this exchange from the floor. She did not look surprised. She did not look disappointed. She looked like a woman who had been expecting exactly this, and had planned for it. She turned to Taeho and spoke quietly, so quietly that only he could hear. Tell Earth to wake up the reserves. Taeho nodded once and touched the communicator on his wrist. High above the capital, on the bridge of the Iron Horizon, Dohun received the signal. He smiled that smile again, the one that was not friendly at all, and began making calls. As they walked back to their shuttle, Soi fell into step beside Jisoo. Captain, what happens now? Jisoo looked at the artificial sky above the Accord capital, at the 3 suns that lit this world that had been built to last forever. Now, she said, they find out what happens when the law isn't enough, and you have to back it up. Commander Dreth brought 60 ships this time. He had learned from the first encounter. He had doubled his fleet, added heavy cruisers with planet-class weapons, and positioned them in a formation designed not to intimidate, but to overwhelm. There would be no negotiation this time, no broadcasts, no handwritten notes. He would enter human space, disable their ships, and tow them back to the capital in chains. It would be fast, clean, and final. Every species in the galaxy would see what happened when someone defied the Accord. His fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Soul Exclusion Zone, and for one long, satisfying moment, Dreth felt the weight of victory already settling on his shoulders. Then his sensor officer made a sound. It was a small sound, barely a word, more like the noise a person makes when they step on something sharp and unexpected. Dreth looked at the display. The 12 human ships were still there, arranged in their same tight formation, but they were not alone anymore. Behind them, spread across a wide arc that stretched from one side of the sensor screen to the other, were 38 more ships. Some were sleek military vessels, angular and sharp. Others were clearly not built for war. Dreth could see the shapes of cargo haulers, mining rigs, and transport ships, all of them bristling with weapons that had been welded onto hulls never designed to carry them. They were ugly, they were uneven, they looked like they had been assembled in a hurry by people who did not care about beauty and cared very much about firepower. 50 ships total, still fewer than his 60. But the gap was no longer a canyon. It was a crack. And cracks, Dreth knew, could widen very quickly. He opened a channel to the Iron Horizon. Captain Han, you have increased your forces. It will not matter. Stand down. Jisoo's voice came back immediately, calm as still water. Commander Dreth, I appreciate your dedication. But before you do anything you will regret, I suggest you check your long-range sensors. Dreth frowned. He nodded to his sensor officer, who expanded the display to show the wider system. And then Dreth understood. They were coming from every direction. Not human ships, not all of them. From the galactic north, a formation of 7 vessels bearing the markings of the Ilthari Collective, a species of deep ocean dwellers who had been Accord members for 3,000 years. From the east, 4 ships from the Venari Republic, a species known for their scholars and their silence. From below the system plane, a cluster of 11 ships from 6 different species, some of whom Dreth had personally escorted into the Accord decades ago. 18 species, 18 Accord members, all of them moving toward Sol. All of them broadcasting the same message on open frequencies. We stand with Earth. We recognize their sovereignty. We withdraw from the Galactic Accord. Dreth stared at the display. His 4 hands, which had been clasped behind his back in perfect military composure, slowly came apart and dropped to his sides. He felt something he had not felt in 100 years of service. He felt uncertain. It had been Rini's transmissions, the legal history, the broadcast of Jisoo's speech, the records of the trial. They had spread through the Accord like fire through dry grass. Species that had been silent for centuries had read Earth's story and seen something they recognized. Not the wars, not the suffering. They had seen the idea that a law could change, that a government could admit it was wrong, that a people could fail and then choose to be better. It was a concept so foreign to the Accord that most species had never even imagined it. And once they imagined it, they could not stop. On the Iron Horizon, Jisoo watched the Allied ships arriving on her tactical display. Soyi was calling out their names and species, her voice cracking slightly with emotion she was trying to control. Tejo stood at the weapons console, his face unreadable, but his shoulders slightly less tense than they had been 5 minutes ago. Do-hyun was watching from the doorway, arms crossed, nodding slowly, like a man watching a bet pay off. Nari was at the science station, receiving transmissions from the arriving ships. Many of them were sending messages to Earth directly. Some were formal diplomatic statements. Some were personal. One from a Venari scholar simply said, "We read your laws. We wept. We did not know laws could sound like that." Dreth had a choice to make, and every option was a disaster. If he attacked now, he would not just be firing on humans. He would be firing on Accord member species. Ships, crewed by citizens of the very coalition he served. That was not a police action. That was civil war. And if he started a civil war on an open broadcast channel, with the entire galaxy watching, the Accord would not survive the week. He stood on his bridge for a long time. His officers waited. His fleet waited. The 60 warships of the Compliance Fleet hung in the dark like a held breath. Then he did something he had never done before. He powered down his weapons. He opened a channel to the Accord capital and requested new orders. On Station Lithera, High Arbiter Voleth received the request and the reports simultaneously. 18 species had formally withdrawn. More were sending inquiries. The Grand Chamber was in chaos, with delegates shouting at each other across the hall. Voleth tried to restore order, tried to invoke his authority, tried to do what the Accord had always done, demand obedience through the sheer weight of tradition. But tradition only works when everyone agrees to carry it. And for the first time in 9,000 years, they did not. A coalition of senior arbiters, led by species that had been loyal to the Accord since its founding, formally removed Voleth from his position. It was done quietly, without ceremony, in a small room off the main chamber. Voleth did not resist. He simply stood, looked at the arbiters who had served beside him for centuries, and said, "You are making a mistake." Then he walked out, and no one followed him. Ambassador Rini was appointed interim High Arbiter by a vote so fast it surprised even her. She accepted the position, and her first act was to open a direct communication channel to the Iron Horizon. Jisoo took the call on the bridge. Rini's holographic image appeared before her. The ambassador's skin was a soft green now, the color of cautious hope. "Captain Han," Rini said, "the Accord recognizes that errors have been made. We would like to discuss a new arrangement. Not submission, not absorption, partnership." Jisoo studied her for a moment. "What kind of partnership?" "A new body, co-founded by Earth and the species that have declared their support. It would exist alongside the Accord as an equal entity, separate governance, shared diplomacy, mutual defense. We are calling it the Interstellar Compact." Jisoo was quiet. On the bridge her crew watched her. Taho, Nari, Soyi, Do-hyun. The people who had stood with her from the first moment that blue light filled the bridge, and an alien voice told them to kneel. "I have one condition," Jisoo said. Rini tilted her head. "Name it." "The founding charter of this compact must include a clause, a simple one. It must state that any law that cannot be challenged is not a law. It is a cage. Every species in the compact must have the right to question, amend, or strike down any rule at any time, through open and fair process. If a law cannot survive being questioned, it does not deserve to exist." Rini was silent for a long moment. Then her skin turned a warm, deep gold, a color that Soy later told Jisoo meant something close to admiration. "Agreed," Rini said. The channel closed, and for the first time since the summons, the bridge of the Iron Horizon was not quiet from tension or focus or fear. It was quiet because everyone on it was feeling the same thing at the same time, and none of them had the words for it yet. Soy broke the silence first. Her voice was small and a little unsteady. "Captain, did you really think this would work? All of it, from the very beginning? Jisoo looked at her. The young ensign who had been shaking when the first hologram appeared, who had opened channels and held steady and done her job every single time it mattered. No, Jisoo said, I did not think it would work, but that has never stopped us before. Taeho, standing at his console, allowed himself a rare smile. It was small and brief and gone almost before it appeared, but it was real. Do-hyun cracked his knuckles loudly and leaned against the doorway. So, he said, in a voice that suggested the fate of galactic civilization was slightly less important than his next question. Do we get shore leave now? Nari did not answer. She was already back at her console, working. Her screen was filled with translation requests. 46 alien species had asked for copies of Earth's legal codes. The requests were still coming in, one after another. A growing wave of civilizations that had spent thousands of years being told what the law was, and were now, for the first time, asking what the law could be. She would be working for months. She did not mind. This was what she had trained for. Not war, not threats. This, the slow, patient work of turning words into bridges. Outside the view screen, the combined fleet hung in the darkness of Sol's Edge. Human ships and alien ships, side by side, ugly and elegant, battered and gleaming. They did not match. They were not meant to. In the years that followed, the interstellar compact grew. 112 species eventually joined, each bringing their own laws, their own histories, their own failures, and the lessons written in them. The founding charter was carved into a monument that stood at the center of the compact's first shared station. It was written in Korean, English, and 14 alien scripts, and it opened with a single line borrowed from one of Earth's oldest declarations. We hold these truths to be self-evident. The galaxy had cautioned Earth to obey. Earth had replied, and the galaxy had listened.